Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchtime update here on NTN. My name is Doreen Georges and with me is Minister of Tourism, Honorable Dominic Fedee, and I will allow our guest from the Ministry of Health to also introduce himself.
Hi, good day. My name is Emerson Vitalis, Senior Environmental Health Officer with Environmental Health Division, Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Today we're here to provide an update as it relates to the government's efforts in terms of the management process of COVID-19. Now we know that some strides have been made with tourism and some strides have been made with what we do on a local level as well. And so I will allow Minister Fedee to touch on some of that. Good afternoon, Minister, and welcome to the lunchtime update here on NTN.
Thank you very much, Doreen, and indeed thanks to your listeners for joining us this afternoon. I would like to describe our initial opening as very successful. While we've had some 1,566 visitors, we've seen that this effort has largely been one where the objective to return our nationals that were stranded abroad have been largely helped. So we've had some 2,256 nationals that have returned since the 9th of July. So some 2 weeks into reopening our borders and our tourism economy, it has actually gone very well. When we take into account that close to 4,000 arrivals have taken place thus far, and the amount of incidences that we've had, it really does pale in comparison to the numbers. And so I am really pleased. The reports we continue to receive from the Ministry of Health, notwithstanding a few blemishes or a few breaches, they seem to suggest that we've had a very high rate of compliance from nationals in St. Lucia and as well as tourists that are coming to the country. So in terms of the rate of arrivals that have come with a test or a COVID test, the numbers suggest that that rate is very high. We continue to implore all returning nationals and also visitors that the pre-testing requirement still remains, and that is something that we're not going to compromise on. We are indeed working very feverishly with our airlines to see how we can service our flights. We have seen in recent times that our flights are dropping off just a little bit in terms of capacity, and that is measured against the demand for our country. We are not discouraged by this at all, but we continue to remain very committed towards the protocols and towards the health and safety of the St. Lucian people. Our quarantine space, over 350 hotel rooms, are maxed to capacity. We're using 5 different locations which were operated as hotel facilities, and these make up the government-run quarantine efforts, and they are all based in the north of the island. And what we're doing is making sure that all the individuals that come in are given the option to institutionalize quarantine, and also very few going into home quarantine. So I think the numbers suggest that we've got over 100 or so in home quarantine. Now, there have been some breaches here in this area, and I want to thank members of the public who have reported those individuals, returning nationals that have been seen, whether buying bread or going to conduct banking services. And we've had these reports and we've acted quickly. The police have been involved, and the Ministry of Health as well. Those individuals that we have found in breach, where they have applied for home quarantine in the initial stages and were approved because of the conditions of their homes and the capacity of their homes being able to do so, we've had to put them into institutionalized quarantine. So we continue to thank the general public for helping us to police this initiative. The Department of Health, the Command Center, and the Cabinet of Ministers are working towards getting some technology that will aid them to be able to track individuals that are approved for home quarantine, and it will give them the opportunity to be able to verify the location of those individuals. So we look forward to this update and this advancement in our COVID response. In terms of jobs that have been created so far, there are some 2,000 jobs that have come back into the local economy, including 500 taxi drivers, 1,400 hotel jobs, and we have dozens other jobs that have come back as well in the excursion sector, albeit we've started with a very limited number of excursions, mostly on the sea base, as we have scaled down the services that are offered within the tourism sector significantly. What we are doing is really operationalizing the very initial and the very first and the pilot phase of our tourism industry reopening. We have had a very smooth opening so far, only 2 individuals that have come back out of the 4,000 arrivals. 2 have tested positive, and those individuals were seen in the system where we were able to quarantine them straight away, give them medical attention. From all indications and reports coming from the Ministry of Health, those individuals are recovering well. And so we continue to ramp up our tests. Over 2,500 tests have been done so far since the coronavirus outbreak has hit the world and St. Lucia started testing. So we are working with various government departments, principally the Ministry of Tourism, the Ministry of Health, the Office of the Prime Minister, and the security forces have really combined forces and has formed a very effective command center which on a daily basis would meet and deliberate over all things that are COVID. And I think that this has really been part of the key to our success. Now, I want to update you on some of the key policy measures that the Cabinet of Ministers and indeed the Command Center are considering as it pertains to how do we advance and revolutionize ourselves and keep bettering every single effort that we have done before in the COVID response. We have now pivoted towards the complete removal of home quarantine except for in extreme circumstances. We've had a few breaches and we have had individuals who have not cooperated, and so we have no choice but to now go into another step of the protocol to ensure that we prioritize the safety and to have now another layer. So in addition to being pre-tested, returning nationals, notwithstanding their right to come back to St. Lucia, will also have to have a confirmed reservation at one of our government-operated quarantine. This is critical and important as we seek to protect the safety of our country and we seek to minimize any potential outbreak in our country. And so we are resolute and we ask for the cooperation of everyone in our country so that we can do our best to keep you safe. Thank you.
Mr. Vitalis, we want to hear from you an update in terms of the efforts of the Ministry of Health and what is being done at this time to ensure that the protocols are adhered to.
Hi, good afternoon, Jareen. Thank you for having me again, and good afternoon, St. Lucian public. When COVID came along in March and we heard about COVID, essentially, environmental health, when we speak of it, it essentially is preventative medicine. And understanding what environmental health is, we got onto the ball right away. We started writing the protocol for the different sectors of St. Lucia, and we looked at the hardware sector, we looked at tourism sector, we looked at the sporting sector, and from then we've been writing the protocols. Again, the aim of environmental health in this whole fight against COVID is to ensure that the public remains safe. We have written quite a bit of protocols from then, and what we're continuously doing is to monitor those protocols, monitor the establishments which are opened, and again to ensure the safety of the general public of St. Lucia.
Going back to Minister, you mentioned that the enforcement of the protocols. We continue to see, especially you mentioned with the removal of home quarantine, that action will be taken in that regard. We know of the stories. We know of situations where people literally leave their homes and go to the bank, or they go out into the public, and we must commend the RSLPF for their efforts, certainly in terms of the level of response that they have had so far. But in terms of visitors, we've also had isolated incidents, but it would be good if you could speak to the most major incident that we've had where a visitor had to be sent back home.
Well, resolute and strong would have to be how we need to approach the compliance of the visitors and also locals that are returning nationals coming from abroad. And what we have done during those individuals that are coming from high risk, we have made it absolutely clear that there is no wavering or there's no fiddling from you adhering to the various quarantine protocols which you have been assigned to, whether it is home or whether it is for you to stay within the confines of a managed hotel environment where they've got the increased sanitization, where they've got the upgrade in terms of the screening. And, you know, of some 1,600 visitors so far, we've had only 3 incidents that have been reported. When we have double-checked some of the suggestions that are being bandied around on Facebook, those did not end up being absolutely correct. And of what we know during it then says that we have a very low rate of non-compliance from individuals, and that is encouraging. But we also want to send a clear message that at the very appearance of people not adhering to the various protocols, that very strict action will be taken against them. And in this instance, we placed the tourist into quarantine on her way back to the airport, and as well we repatriated her back to her home country in a very managed environment the very next day. So I leave your viewers with every assurance that we are taking all the steps necessary, whether it is against a tourist or local, to ensure that they adhere to the principles.
Minister Fedee, we saw the opening up of the UK market to St. Lucia on Sunday with the reintroduction of British Airways, and of course that will set the tone for additional carriers out of that market. Are there concerns in terms of visitors coming in and the protocols?
Well, I'm pleased to see that the numbers in the UK are stabilizing somewhat, and the UK, as you know, Jurain, is a very important tourism market to St. Lucia and very pivotal to the economy. And I am very pleased that British Airways resumed their service on the weekend. And that can only bode well for the advancement of tourism and for the advancement of our economies. And this will no doubt send some confidence to the local hotel community, who are no doubt hedging their bets in terms of when to open, when not to open. And I think it will also help the global demand for travel that is taking place. We note with much interest that the UK has had to put back a travel requirement on the country of Spain. So British nationals that are going to Spain from the UK upon their return would have had to now go into mandatory quarantine. When you have a situation or policy such as that, what is going to essentially happen is it's going to be an impediment for tourism. Now, the best thing that we can do for ourselves is to make sure we manage the public health situation very well. Once we manage the public health situation, then we stand a very good chance of continuing to make grounds in advancing our tourism industry, but most importantly, creating opportunities for jobs and for businesses and for governments to collect taxes and the economic spin-offs that we so rely upon for our economic development.
We're due for a break, but when we come back, more on the lunchtime update here on NTN.
COVID-19 has changed the way we do things. It has changed the way we travel, the way we interact with each other. On July 9th, we saw the recommencement of commercial services into the destination. And ever since, it has been ongoing. We wanted to hear from our visitors themselves about their experience thus far.
I registered the 4 of us, which took a total of 8 minutes. And then I had to email in each of our COVID tests, which took another 5 minutes.
I think the experience itself, getting through to the front desk and then get into my room, I'm ready to stay here for another 2 months.
When we were trying to figure out where to come to, which island would be safest, we went through a series of where we would feel comfortable, where were there few cases, where was there good government guidance.
At the airport,
the process flowed smoothly, almost as if it had been very well thought out, implemented, and practiced.
on board the taxi.
Getting into Castries was fairly rapid. I think we took probably just about half an hour to 45 minutes. That was good. And all in all, I was comfortable all through the trip. So I thought that was good. And the taxi driver himself, as I said, he made it, a comforting drive.
Why St. Lucia was the destination of choice.
Would definitely recommend everyone to come to St. Lucia if you want a safe, healthy vacation.
It's completely different for us, but it's almost as if it's disappeared. We feel that confident and that comfortable.
At the hotel,
I was just concerned about having to be on the resort all the time, but it has actually turned out to be a fabulous experience.
Things being sanitized constantly. When you enter a restaurant, you're being asked to sanitize your hands. There's sanitizer in the room. There are sanitizer wipes in your room.
The lady at the front desk, whose name I don't remember at this point in time, was excellent. She immediately sort of, just made me recognize, well, hold on a minute. You have just arrived. You just need to go around for a bit, enjoy the sea, enjoy the spa.
why come to St. Lucia?
We didn't know what to expect because this is our first trip outside of the United States since the COVID. But everything was very regulated. Everything was thought out. We felt very safe. We knew that we had made the right choice coming here.
Now, during the first 2 weeks of operation, incoming travelers totaled 1,635, of which 1,085 are visitors. On the economic front, 500 certified taxi drivers have returned to work, and so too have over 1,400 hotel employees. Training is also ongoing for beach vendors, and more hotels will be certified in the very near future.
The protocols they have in place helped push us to want to come to St. Lucia as well.
On July 25th, the important UK market will also open up to St. Lucia with the reintroduction of British Airways. Before arriving in St. Lucia, be sure to obtain a negative PCR COVID-19 test within 7 days of travel. Ensure that you are booked into a certified hotel and pre-fill the mandatory arrival form. In St. Lucia, you will be screened and may also be subject to testing on arrival. Guests are only permitted to use authorized certified taxis. When at your hotel, you must always remain on the property, unless participating in certified water-based activities organized through your hotel. Visitors are encouraged to comply with all protocols, as failure to do so would result in stringent penalties, including your return home. Remember, these protocols are guided by law. When coming to St. Lucia, be sure to protect yourself and others.
St. Lucia, let her inspire you.
Welcome back to the lunchtime update here on NTN. With me is Tourism Minister Honorable Dominic Fedee, and from one of our environmental officers within the Ministry of Health, Mr. Emerson Vitalis. Mr. Vitalis, during the break we were talking about what new efforts are underway in your department, and you were touching on sporting. Tell us a little bit about that.
So with the advent of all the development of the protocols, we've developed, I said, for the tourism sector, the taxi sector. We also recognized lately that we've been getting quite a bit of applications for the sporting sector. Also the catering sector, we've been receiving quite a bit of applications. And what I want the public to understand is that within the development of those protocols, the essential goal is about protecting public health and public safety. And they do come to us, those applications, we review them, we assess, And the aim is not to shut down or to prevent any activity from happening, but the aim is to do it in a controlled environment, an environment which promotes public health and safety. And that's what the protocols aim to do at the end of the day. So we have been working with quite a bit of sporting institutions, sporting organizations, as far as Schwizel, also some of the caterers who are coming in and they want to again, begin the catering business, to gain revenue and, to serve the public. So we have been working with quite a bit of them in developing those protocols and assessing the establishments for compliance. And I must say most of them are compliant because they recognize that without compliance they really can't operate and they can't provide that level of safety which we are engendering from the public. So yes, these are some of the few areas which has been coming up lately.
I know that with the COVID response, one of our taglines was to securing lives and restoring livelihoods, and I believe that's what the protocols aim to do throughout it all. I just want to let the public know that very soon we'll be opening up the lines to take your calls and to answer any of the questions or concerns that you may have. But before we do that, we just want to reiterate what our strictly enforced mandatory travel protocols are, and that would include having a negative PCR test prior to arrival in St. Lucia, and that test must be done no more than 7 days prior to boarding of your flight. All arriving passengers must pre-fill the travel registration form prior to arriving in St. Lucia, and that form can be found on www.stlucia.org/COVID-19. Now on that website, you will see where all the protocols are outlined as well, what the do's and don'ts are, as well as you can fill out the form as it relates to you, whether you're a returning national, a visitor, or if you are a cruise ship worker trying to return home. All arriving passengers must adhere to all protocols relevant to the airports. That includes screening and any necessary particulars that may be asked of you at the time of arrival. All arriving passengers will be screened, and this includes temperature checks. All symptomatic passengers will be immediately isolated and tested, and of course that is an obvious because all of the efforts are to mitigate any possible spread of COVID-19 into local communities. If the test result is positive for the COVID-19, the passenger will be transferred to the respiratory hospital for treatment and care, and other passengers will be transferred via certified taxi to approved COVID-19 accommodation, a government quarantine site, or home quarantine, which is in the now. However, that, like Minister mentioned, the protocols for home quarantine or even considerations for home quarantine at this time is being revised. Hotel guests traveling from outside the designated travel bubble, and when we see the travel bubble, these are countries with low or zero instances of COVID-19 that have been approved by the Ministry of Health, rather Department of Health and Wellness, as it relates for travel to St. Lucia. So if you're traveling from outside the designated travel bubble, you are to remain on property, and that is on your COVID-certified hotel property, for the duration of your stay, except participating in water-based excursions that will be organized and communicated through your hotel. Visitors to hotels are also reminded that during this pilot phase of operation, split stays at the various resorts are not permitted, and again, that is another mitigation process. Any attempt to do so, of course, will be flagged through the robust entry screening process, and the hotels too have been complying and cooperating with that. In keeping St. Lucia safe, the public is encouraged to call 311 hotline if you notice any infringements. And I repeat, should you notice any infringements of the protocols, whether it be visitor or national, you're encouraged to call 311 hotline or the nearest police station and report the matter. Action, of course, will be taken. Again, all of our efforts are to ensure that our local communities remain protected. And for more information on St. Lucia's protocols and for the pre-filling of the travel registration form, again, you can visit www.stlucia.org/COVID-19. Now, we'll be prepared to take your calls anytime from now, and we will answer any of the concerns that you may have as it relates to the COVID-19 response, mandatory protocols for travel, any concerns that you may have. We are here to answer your calls. Minister, you spoke earlier of changes to home quarantine, and we understand why. Just Sunday, with the reintroduction of British Airways, we happened to witness something that we probably thought we would not have witnessed at the airport, and that is the changing of the wristbands from what is supposed to be for government quarantine to what is to be for home quarantine. And luckily, the system at the airport is so robust that it could have flagged that, because a few of us monitored to see what would have happened. Of course, should there have been any sort of breach, the police would have been alerted. But we continued to monitor the individuals to see what would have happened. They got to the taxi station, the dispatch unit, and when their names were presented, it was mentioned that their wristbands were, she asked that she see their wristbands, and it was at that point she said to them, well, you're not approved for home quarantine, your name here is listed for government quarantine. And I was like, great, that's another flag in the system for people trying to at least push on that, even with the wristbands. You know, that information is getting out there as to what colors are being used. So that is another thing that we have to keep our eyes on at the airports.
Well, I think it's absolutely imperative that we get the cooperation of everyone, your cooperation and us working together and adhering to the protocols that has been the key to our success. And, you know, I think that so far, by and large, St. Lucians have been very cooperative, and they have worked together to ensure that we not only manage the virus well, but we also reduce any likelihood or stem the great chance of there being community spread. So I think that we got to remain strict to them, and we have to give ourselves the very best.
We have a call on the line. Good afternoon, caller. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm just bringing up. Hello?
Yes, good afternoon, caller.
Say that your protocols for nationals returning is not working, because I know that nationals that are going in home quarantine are actually not staying in their home and they're walking around town. So obviously that's a concern for many of us.
Okay. We are aware that there are infringements to the protocols, and so with any alert, we encourage the public as well to call the 311 hotline anonymously or report to the nearest police station. I can reassure you that action has been taken, and action will continue to be taken against the violators. Just this week we had some put into government quarantine for violating the home protocol. Of course, we expect that those who have signed for the home protocol regulations would do so out of a level of integrity, but that continues to be tested. So again, we encourage the public of any known infringements, and caller, that includes you as well. You can anonymously call the 311 hotline or report to the nearest police station, and action definitely will be taken.
Okay, thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for letting us know, caller. It's very important that we all look out for each other.
Exactly.
Especially during this pandemic, and we've been able to stay so well, and I think that your call is very welcome.
Clearly, we can see that there are concerns from members of the public, but just reminding them that there is a hotline that they can call to report anonymously, because not everybody would be comfortable reporting, or, as we say in St. Lucian terms, squealing. Yeah. You know?
And it's good to understand that they're cooperating, because at the end of the day, we can't do it on our own. I mean, we as a monitoring agency can't, achieve that goal on our on our own. So the public's cooperation is also good. But also, you mentioned earlier in terms of the wristband. And what we must understand with systems are designed and they're created to enforce and to serve a particular purpose. And as it goes along, we see the breaches and we can understand where the gaps are. So again, as we continue to monitor the systems or incoming passengers, we would see the gaps and would see the breaches. But again, we would be working to definitely, build back those gaps which are existing.
Absolutely, and the sector agencies continue to work in tandem to ensure that all of these gaps can be strengthened, and practically the command center meets every morning to ensure that any loopholes are discussed and immediate action is taken. And I can guarantee you that, definitely.
You see, the management of this, it has to be watertight, and that's what we've been up to. That's why you see that there's been very proactive leadership from the top, from the level of the Prime Minister all the way down to what we do. And that is to ensure that we're proactive and we've taken some very, very tough decisions.
Definitely.
And I think that we have been bold and we've been courageous, and even when the decisions have been unpopular, we have been we've been up to the task. We have always been willing to take them, and I think we have to continue with that level of strong and courageous leadership to ensure that we keep our country safe and to stave off any potential of the virus. I think that so far, I hope that individuals are going to begin to trust the protocols a little more as we see the first few weeks of our tourism industry reopening and we haven't had any community outbreak. It really says something about the level of management that is taking place by the health experts and the people in the medical field who have done a stellar job. First of all, they outlined that there is a certain level of risk, but if you manage the risk well, then you stand a chance of cushioning any blow that there could be. So I am very, very pleased, Joreen, that we have only had 2 cases out of the 4,000 people that have returned from abroad. So, but to ensure that this is done, we need people to stick to the home quarantine. We've received reports that individuals have tried to get out of quarantine to go to parties, and individuals who are approved for home quarantine was seen going to local banks and that type of activity. So we absolutely want to preclude and to ask for everyone's cooperation again. We clearly are not out of the woods as yet. We cannot be complacent. I think that if the CMO was sitting here, she would say exactly the same thing, and that is that we have to continue wearing our masks. We have to continue doing all of those things that have made us successful in the first place.
Thank you, Minister. I believe our time is also up for the lunchtime update, so we just want to thank the public for tuning in. Of course, we will join you again in the very near future with more of an update as it relates to the COVID-19 response and the strengthening of our protocols. Thank you again for joining us, Mr. Vitalis, and thank you again, Minister